Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Okay, let's learn, guys. Hope everyone's doing well. My name's Connor, if you're new. It's such a great title. England's favorite king liked France better. Life and Times of Richard the Lionheart. History abridged with Jack Rackham. Preemptive like. Let's get started. Let's go. Let's learn.
Watching. Everyone else tune out. Okay, this video is just for the Brits watching. Everyone else tune out. This might be embarrassing.
Well, it's been fun. No, let's go.
We good? Okay, come here. So, you and Richard the Lionheart, I know you and him, you've been close for a long time. He's a national hero.
Is he about to break some news?
All right, you've had a lot of great memories with him. He gave you the 3 lions on your coat of arms. And I want you to know I'm only telling you this because I care about you. England, Richard never loved you.
I'm sorry, guys. No, let's go.
This episode is sponsored by McJibbin TV.
Oh, nice.
Yep, that Warriors series I've been telling you about since this summer, they've got an episode on Richard too. But get this, he also shows up on an episode of Battle Castle. For the 60% of you who aren't subscribed, McJibbin TV is a documentary streaming service with over 3,000 titles to choose from, including a couple that I've been recommending for literal months because there's that much good
Is that Dan?
choose from, including a couple that I've been...
Is that Dan? Dan. It is Dan Snow.
that I've been recommending.
I thought I
for
recognized your
literal
bottom
months
face.
because there's that much good content in these
The
two
bottom of
series
your-
alone. And they're giving away their whole library free for 30 days if you use the link in the description. And right now they're offering a buy one get one free gift card for Christmas, which also gives you an extra month free even if you're already a member. You can give someone else the gift of knowledge, there's no shipping to deal with, 10 out of 10. I don't know what more I need to tell you. Open up a new tab, go check them out after this. Now just hear me out, okay? You know, yes, his dad, Henry II, was your king, but his mom, Eleanor, shout out to her, she was from France. Well, Aquitaine. It's France today, but she was still married to the king of France. Look, that's
I didn't know Aquitaine went so far
France.
east.
Well, Aquitaine. It's France today, but she was still
Italy.
married to the king of France. Look, that's beside the point. Richard might not have even understood English. Certainly he didn't write his poetry in English. That was all Occitan and French. But you know, I get it. You get a king who's 6'1" and strawberry blonde, you're weak at the knees, arms spaghetti. Let me just show you who Richard really was. In 1170, it looked like Richard's dad, Henry II, was not long for this earth, so he named his son, young Henry, as the co-monarch of England, because God knows that worked out so well whenever the Romans tried it. And Eleanor intervenes on Richard's behalf and gets him his inheritance early, so now he's the Duke of Aquitaine. But Henry II doesn't.
Sorry.
His inheritance early, so now he's the Duke of Aquitaine.
Okay.
But Henry II doesn't die, and things get kind of awkward because his sons are kind of getting used to the idea of ruling on their own. So young Henry, who might have had a little suggestion from his mother, he says, "Guys, I'm 18 years old already. I can't spend the rest of my life waiting for Dad to die. Let's get that inheritance now." So Henry gets France and Scotland on his side, and Richard and his brother Jeff...
Sorry, guys. Medievalica is not even like a play on words. This has nothing to do with metal. Medieval. Okay.
Now. So Henry gets France and Scotland on his side, and Richard and his brother Jeff, they decide their game too. And Prince John stays at home because he's 5 years old. What they didn't count on, however, was the fact that Henry II still controlled all of England's money and could just buy a bunch of mercenaries to take care of everything. Richard gets beaten early because he's 16 and he hides in a castle for the rest of the war. The French king signs a separate peace, leaving the brothers stranded, and the Scottish king, oh, the Scottish king. His name is William the Lion. He was old enough to know better, but he charges right into the English army shouting, "Now we shall see which one of us are good knights." And then he gets knocked off his horse and arrested. He was not a good knight. So Richard and his brothers all weep at their dad's feet, and he gives them some castles to rule until he dies. Not a bad deal. The people who get punished are actually the barons who supported Richard, and Henry II makes Richard do the punishing, like, "Yeah, how dare you support me? Shame." Meanwhile,
Oh god, that's not funny, but funny.
The punishing, like,
Sorry.
yeah, how
I sound like a psycho.
dare you support me? Shame! Meanwhile, he's chilling in his new castles. People actually died for this. Anyway, Richard goes through with it because Eleanor's being held hostage, and if he misbehaves, Dad's gonna execute Mom. Whoops. This puts the
Classic.
barons in a sour mood, and they get Richard's brothers to help with a rebellion against him because they figure if they can't take land from their dad, at least they can take it from their brother.
Who's this guy?
Because they figure if they can't take land from their dad, at least they can take it from their brother. But Richard is a man now, and he claims victory by hiding in the same castle. All this to say, England, Aquitaine was Richard's first love. That's who he was fighting for. But yeah, I know, these teenage romances, they don't always last. So let's fast forward, shall we? Young Henry dies before his dad, so that means Richard is next in line for the English throne. But that means Prince John, the good little boy who didn't raise an army against his father, he's next in line to inherit Aquitaine. And what did Richard do? Was he faithful to you, England? No, he ran onto the battlefield and risked everything for his precious Aquitaine. He even promised to give up Normandy and Anjou to the French king just to hold on to that one
Okay, well, it's not like he was offering land on the British Isles for Aquitaine, so, right?
duchy he held so dear. Cut back to Henry II approaching Eleanor in her cell, and with a heavy heart, he gave her Aquitaine instead. It was actually a smart move. She was the only one Richard would accept. And let's be real, she was gonna outlive her husband, and I'm not saying Richard was her favorite son. I'm just saying John's more of a Shinji than a Ray, if you catch my drift. Sure enough,
I don't.
Henry II kicks the bucket. Aquitaine's as good as Richard's, but it's out of the picture for now. Right now, it's his coronation day, and he's giving England his undivided attention. But
Psych.
be real with me, England. Do you even remember his coronation night? Because you were pretty blitzed, and things got crazy. You and Richard banned Jews from attending, but a few were just such big fans of his, they came in just to give him presents. And he had them stripped, flogged, and kicked out onto the street. And then somehow, people start spreading rumors that Richard wants death to all Jews, and the people of London stage a medieval Christian.
The fact that Judaism survives is impressive. Just gonna say, the amount of times, no matter what century, that they're just like, oh, no Jewish people allowed. Nope. And there's still a thing.
Kristallnacht. And I know rich to all Jews, and the people of London stage a medieval Kristallnacht. And I know Richard didn't really want to go that far. He punished the worst offenders and asked everyone else to chill, but then he goes off on crusade and no
Chill.
one's there to stop a town full of Jewish families from being chased into a local castle where they got burned alive. And yeah, it was the 1100s. I know you've changed since then, England, but tell me that's not a red flag. Besides, Richard was your king for 10 years, and how much of that time did he ever spend with you? I'd wager 6 months, if that. I hate to break it to you, but the
Take it easy, man. All right? Don't stop.
man's a gold digger. I know you're still very impressed with that trip to the Holy Land he told you about, and believe me, we'll get there. But guess where the money for that little excursion came from? He used you as his personal piggy bank. I'm not just talking about increased taxes. I'm talking about how he let world leaders like Scotland buy back privileges from him. How he auctioned off your political offices for cash. Do you know what he said about you, England? He said he would have sold London if he could find a buyer. Also, he could go gallivanting.
The presentation in this video sounds more like trying to start a fight than trying to, in good faith, inform people, which is hilarious, I gotta say.
He would have sold London if he could find a buyer.
You gonna
Also, he
take
could
that?
go gallivanting in the east and come back home to Aquitaine. But let's talk about that crusade, shall we? As you might recall, he promised to give Philip II of France Normandy and Anjou, but that didn't really pan out, so they're not friends anymore. So to make sure neither of them invaded the other while they weren't looking, they carpooled on their way to the Holy Land. They make a quick pit stop in Sicily, where Richard ends up declaring war on the whole kingdom William when he finds out his sister is in prison, and then Richard's engagement to Philip's sister, the one thing that might have kept the peace with France, it's called off because he was as faithful to her as he was to you, England, and he got hitched to a Navarrese princess mid-road trip. His new wife-to-be ends up getting blown off course to Cyprus, where she gets arrested by the rebel leader in control of the island, and yeah, I don't know what they were expecting. Richard declared war on them and conquered everything. I know this seems like a useless side quest, but it's important to mention that a certain king of Jerusalem helped him take the island, and in return, he expected a little help taking care of a potential
Jesus.
rival. With the world
No, it was a few millennia late, or a millennia late. Never mind. Just Jesus came to mind.
It's important to mention that a certain king of Jerusalem helped him take the island, and in return, he expected a little
real,
help
right?
taking care of a potential rival. With the world's
Judas.
bloodiest pit stop behind them, they finally get to the Holy Land and are off to a good start with the Siege of Acre, victoriously holding
You know, for a split second, I didn't see anything wrong with him being in a car. I was like, yeah, probably. Oh, wait, no cars.
the Holy Land and are off to a good start with the Siege of Acre, victoriously holding their banners atop the wall for all to see. France and England side by side.
Best
and
buds.
I am also here. Yeah,
Austria?
so the Holy Roman Emperor was supposed to be part of this crusade, but he drowned in a river on the way over, and so the Empire sent the Duke of Austria instead. Richard and Philip are
It's cool how their flag hasn't changed.
frankly insulted, and they throw his stupid flag in the moat, so he quits and goes back home. And then Philip wants half of Cyprus all of a sudden, so he quits and goes back home.
People never change. There's something very comical to me. There's something very comical that I think about. It's that, did that make sense? This thought is comical to me that I'm about to say. People, if you took everyone around you today and just made them, all of us, transported back and replaced the people and grew up in that time, and like we didn't know, we would act the same way. That there's something so kind of funny that we're living around a bunch of people who in the past we would have acted like they did in the past.
Home.
Maybe that's not as a profound thought as I thought.
So and then Philip wants half of Cyprus all of a sudden, so he quits and goes back home. So considering this crusade was pretty much pulled off exclusively by Richie and the Templars, yeah, he was a good soldier, fanboys eat your heart out. But after trekking through the desert getting constantly harassed with no major
Where's
allies,
Philip?
he's not gonna take Jerusalem, he knows he's not gonna take Jerusalem, and even if he did, he'd have to leave the entire army of England there just to defend it. And despite the Templars guilt tripping, he decides it's time to quit and go back home, because no way did he trust John and Philip alone together. Okay, first, according to one Muslim historian, he has an epic moment where he rides in front of Saladin's army shouting, "Come at me, bro," and they all retreat, so Jerusalem gets the coastline back, and they make a quick truce and allowed pilgrims to travel to Jerusalem unimpeded. Then he quit and went back home. Actually, that's not true. He tried to, but first off, more bad weather strands him in Byzantine territory, and they're still pretty upset about that whole Cyprus thing, so he has to sneak off in disguise. And then more bad luck, he gets
As a
shipwrecked
horse?
in Italy, so he has to go home over land, and then I guess figure out how to cross the channel. But he never gets that far, because as he's traveling through the Holy Roman Empire, he gets ambushed by a certain familiar face asking, "Whose flag is stupid now?" Also, you're wanted for murder. Oh god, I'm sorry, England. I thought you knew. No, honey, he wasn't in France. He was doing hard time for murder. You remember that king of Jerusalem who needed a favor for what went down in Cyprus? Let's just say his rival had a happy little accident involving two strangers and a knife. And Richard was suspect number one. I mean, they were working with the medieval legal system, so who knows who's really responsible, but there's
Spin
a
the
pretty
wheel.
convincing case to be made. And guess who ends up
Look at the wheel. It's like, okay, you have to get janitor duty or possibly eaten by a shark.
Who knows who's really responsible, but there's a pretty convincing case to be made. And guess
That's an Avatar reference. Avatar Last Airbender?
system, so Who knows who's really responsible, but there's a pretty convincing case to be made. And guess who ends up footing the bill? That's right, the English fork over 2 to 3 times the crown's annual revenue for Richard's mom to pay the ransom. Once
$2
Richard got free
billion.
of the clink, John and Philip decide it's now or never if they want to make a move. John stakes his claim to the Kingdom of England, and Philip makes a move on Normandy. So what's the good King Richard's plan to save England from the foul clutches of his infamous brother? He buries the hatchet, says, yeah, whatever, you're next in line now, just don't push it. What does he do for Normandy? He leads his men into battle and launches construction on one of the finest castles of the age, spending 2 to 3 times what he spent on all the castles he ever built
On
in
Magellan
England.
TV.
What could have taken nearly a decade in peacetime, he created in 2 years during war, built atop a sheer cliff overlooking a river crucial for trade and transport. Once more, Richard would stake everything on hiding in a castle and waiting for the enemy to get tired. Unfortunately, Richard died from an infection putting down a minor revolt, so he didn't live to see the epic battle that would determine the fate of Normandy, which means I'm not allowed to talk about it. Sorry, link in the description.
That was fantastic. That was funny and informative. That's all I can ask for with good conscience. Yeah, it was interesting. I'm sorry, England, to break the news to you. You seem pretty cool, honestly, so I don't see what the big deal was. Love y'all. Hope you're all doing well. Would appreciate any comments down below, any answers, any questions I had, any comments at all. And hopefully I will see you guys next time for another video. We'll keep on learning. Bye, guys.